Hello, kia ora, and welcome along to the Music 101 interview podcast. I'm Charlotte Ryan. Now, for the last couple of days, I've been obsessed with all the footage that's been coming out on Glastonbury Festival. I don't know if you've been before, or perhaps you're like me and you watch it from afar, but isn't it cool we can watch music festivals from our home these days? I don't know if I could handle 5 days at a festival. I think it could be quite intense. Anyway, Florence and the Machine to me is a classic Glastonbury Festival artist. She's actually played there 6 times before, not this year, but she's also played lots of times in New Zealand. And this week's Throwback Thursday podcast is my interview with her ahead of her Spark Arena show just last year. I'd interviewed her before, but this time she was different. She was sort of even more ethereal. She was even more dreamy, but still very, very articulate. And quite honest when we were talking about her latest album, Dance Fever. Hello, this is Charlotte.
Oh, hi, it's Florence. Hi, how are you?
I wanted to ask about Dance Fever because I haven't interviewed you since the release of that album, and it feels like such an uplifting, strong album. Is that what you intended to make?
I don't know if I intended it to be uplifting. I'm glad that it came across that way, and I'm glad that there's a defiance to it, I think, that is really uplifting. I found it really cathartic to make. I mean, it did make me feel... But there's also an element, I think, in King, and certainly the scream at the end is sort of one of frustration and confusion and like not really having the answers. There's a sort of streak of defiance, I think, that runs all the way through the record, but it is also some kind of a scream of frustration, and there's like something rattling to get out all the time. Also, just the way that it was made was so stop and start due to like lockdowns, and not wondering if I was ever going to get this thing finished. And it's an interesting record because the whole crux of it is this worth it? the whole of the King song is like, can you ever make something perfect and beautiful enough to sort of it takes such a lot out of you, I think. And that's the whole battle of the record, is you're sort of battling the creative side and the more domestic side, and the side that wants calm and the side that wants peace. And so I'm always really glad when I hear people find it empowering, but I'm not actually sure if that is what I set out to do, but it felt very cathartic to me.
That's so interesting hearing you explain it.
It's a record about sort of creative madness also, as well, with the choreomania aspect of like relentless dance and kind of dancing yourself to the brink of exhaustion and death, and the sort of relentless pursuit of creativity, and trying to analyze that in myself and being like, why do I keep not like choosing to stop and to choose family and to choose domesticity? What always takes me back to this thing that can never be perfect, and I feel like I can never quite get it right. And it is a kind of like, is the pull of creativity, is that every time you almost get it perfect but not quite, and that's why you have to go back. Like that's sort of the thing. Every time I tell myself this one will be the one that I'm satisfied with, and it never quite happens.
Are you saying you weren't satisfied with Dance Fever, the album as a whole?
It's such an interesting place to be in with this record, because I sort of set myself up for that. Even in the song, I was never satisfied. It never let me go. It just dragged me by my hair and back on with the show. The start of the record is about perpetual creative dissatisfaction, and the sort of, I think you are never satisfied. Like you just, and it's a kind of trick that you play on yourself to make yourself like do it. Does that make sense? Like, and then
how do you know when to stop then, or how do you know when to?
Well, you don't. The album just kind of has to get taken out of your hands. It's so painful. Yes. And I really felt it. I felt it very deeply on this record, because even though that's the thing about my songs, is they know me better than I know myself. I'm always telling the truth in my music. I'm always saying something, always a truth about myself, but often I can't hear it. So I knew, even by saying it, I was like, oh, well, that's just a joke. Of course, I'll be like creatively satisfied with this one. But as they were trying to take it off me and say, we have to release it now, it was agony. Like, it's the pain of, it's a kind of album about, you know, like it's sort of the ecstasy and the agony of creativity. And it kind of like, I thought it would get easier as I get older, but it just feels like the stakes get higher. So it just gets sort of harder to give it away.
Oh, I feel the pain in my body now, you saying that. Were you aware of the religious themes that you were including in it? You know, some of the song titles, Heaven is Here, Girls Against God and Prayer Factory.
Yeah, my mum is always asking, she was like, where does that come from? Because we didn't, she like comes to the show, and because she's a professor of Renaissance studies and she's sort of much more interested in symbolism than melody, really. She's like, where's all that coming from? Because we didn't have a religious upbringing. It's just, you know, it was like, it was quite academic, really. Like, we did go to church a bit. I think really what it is where that comes from is this sort of, a lot of what this record was where do you find meaning, you know? And so for me, meaning had always been in performance. And it's interesting, the record itself is sort of chronological. So you would think that King and Free were written, you know, during the lockdowns and in the pandemic, but they actually weren't. And even Choreomania, which seems is a song based on a medieval plague, it was all written before it. Yeah, it was sort of the prescient nature of songwriting is always so weird to me. And so the album is almost sort of chronological. So I had gone to New York to kind of like make Dance Fever to make this album. And then you get up to Choreomania. You get up to Back in Town, ironically, in the chronology of the record. I was back in town, I was making the album, and I had to go home. And there, kind of chronologically, you've entered into like various lockdowns, and the album just completely shifts. And I think when gigs for me have always been my church, or my sense of when I perform, I feel like it is something bigger and outside of myself that I can't really explain. And I feel that a bit in songwriting, in terms of when I speak about, often I'm saying things about myself or about the world that potentially I can't even in my day-to-day life really register. You know, it comes from a different place. And so I think it had been my sort of biggest sense of spiritual connection had been shows. And so I think I was trying to unpack my relationship with that power, with that creative spirit, and being like, this is gone. You know, there was a period there when we just didn't know when live music was going to come back. And so, you know, for this album that had been about the relentless pursuit of creativity and never stopping dancing and never stopping moving, it was completely stopped in its tracks. And I guess a lot of the album was asking this creative spirit, or being in communication with it, of why? Why? And in quite a funny way, like, I think especially Girls Against God is like acknowledging your own insignificance in such a big way. Like, it's just so, it's kind of so silly to be sitting there shaking your fists at the sky because your like own insignificance is just so apparent. So I think there's a sense of humor in that too that runs all the way through, that I find really important to ground the sort of loftier things, the bigger questions.
How was it taking the songs from the recording studio to the stage? Is that quite straightforward for you, for your process? Do you think about performing the songs when you're writing them?
It's been amazing, because it was also, like I was saying, it was an album that when I set out to make it, and it had such a fractured journey, my ambition was, making records is really hard. And it's exactly what I'm saying. Like, the agony of making a record is, no matter how hard you try, you will never think that it's perfect, and you'll never think that it's finished. Gigs are not like that. Like, that's why I love live music, because it's completely in the moment. Anything can happen. Anything can change. Like, it is sort of, as a perfectionistic person, someone who struggled with that, it is such a liberation from that for me, because it could just be sheer chaos, and that's beautiful. And so when I set out to make this record, I was like, you know what? Making records is hard, but I know where my strengths are, and that's as a live performer. So I was making it very much with festivals and gigs and shows in mind. And then they all disappeared, and the record just, I didn't even know if we would get to play these songs again. And so, especially a song with My Love, that one was written with no conception that it would ever be even able to be played live. And at that point, I just wanted something that I could like cry dance to in my kitchen. So getting out and like playing the songs has been so emotional. Just getting to see people. My dream, I was like, I would listen to the demo of My Love and dance, kind of cry dance in my kitchen, and just be like, imagine like one day a room full of people dancing to this. And I'm just like, it's so amazing to see people enjoying it and moving and just, seeing people dance collectively and come together in joy is just, it's just such an amazing thing to get to witness.
Oh, I cannot wait to see you perform live in just less than a month now. Florence, what can we expect for your live show in New Zealand? Are you bringing much of a stage show?
Yeah, so I think I'm really excited to come back, actually. We love playing New Zealand, and especially this album. It's sort of this album, because of the theatrical, it's sort of like a theatre show, I think, because of the chronological nature of the album and like the themes of performance and the themes of myth versus reality. Like, I think, what did someone describe it as like Midsommar, the musical?
Ooh.
It's quite immersive now because everyone's dressing up as well, which has been the most incredible thing to witness. Something about the artwork and the creative direction that I work with Autumn de Wilde on, which is sort of some of the most, it's really returning to my like maximalist roots, and I've loved that. But what's been so nice is that people really are like expressing themselves in a really creative way at the shows. Like, I honestly show up at the shows and there are people who are like way better dressed than I am out there. Like, they've just like made like the most extraordinary things, like headpieces and flowers. So I think honestly, like, it feels like a really 360 experience now. Like Dance Fever on stage, off stage, people have just immersed themselves in the world of this record, and I will come just to see the crowd, to be honest. It's so beautiful.
Oh, that is so special. That really shows the impact of the album on us. So thank you so much for making it, even though it took ages and you let it go to us.
It's my own fault. It's like, I do it to myself. What is it? Came for the pleasure, stayed for the pain. It's really, it's real.
Oh, I love it, Florence. Thank you so, so much for your time, and safe travels to New Zealand. We cannot wait to see you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Bye.
You've been listening to another Music 101 interview podcast. I was speaking with Florence Welch from Florence the Machine. You must go and listen to the band's latest album. It's called Dance Fever. I say they're a band, but it really is just Florence. But anyway, go and listen to Dance Fever. And I love the song King. And while you're there, go and listen to her back catalogue too. Dog Days Are Over is such a classic song still. And if you like music and like hearing what musicians think, make sure you follow this podcast, the Music 101 Interview Podcast, and then go and share it with all your music-loving friends. Until next time,